I was thinking to myself, why am I stopping? Is my ankle hurting? I had never, after surgeries, I had never walked this far before. Maybe this is too far. Maybe this is, I can't do this. And I realized, no, that's not why I'm stopping. Why I'm stopping is I'm so thrilled and filled with gratitude that I can do this.
Welcome to Wild Development Studio. Join us as we venture into the breathtaking realm of wildlife arts and untamed adventures. With captivating stories from the field and ideas to dive into the visual arts, we'll ignite your passion for conservation. Get ready to develop something wild.
A very wild welcome. I'm your host, Lauren. Here, each person's story about their experience with nature becomes a guiding light. In the teaser, you heard Jo Giese explaining how she felt as she was beating the odds. Today, we're going to dive into her triumphant journey, returning to hike waterfalls all around the world and the benefits of being around waterfalls. Jo is an award-winning radio journalist, author, teacher, community activist, and global traveler. As a special correspondent, she was part of the Peabody Award-winning team at Marketplace. Her nonfiction has appeared in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, Vogue, and more. She recently published the book, Never Sit If You Can Dance, Lessons from My Mother. She's begun working on her next book project, Keep Chasing Waterfalls, a story of adventure, tragedy, and defying the odds. But thank you, Jo, for being here today.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. And I have to tell you something before we kind of really begin. On your website, I was so impressed by one of the quotes that's there. And it's the quote, "We only protect what we love. We only love what we understand. And we only understand what we are taught." And that's the Jacques Cousteau quote. And the reason I identified with that so much is when I first moved to California from New York City, I would be hiking in the Santa Monica Mountains that are right behind where I live now. And the woman in the hiking group, I didn't understand this in the beginning, but the woman who had put together this hiking group, what her real mission was to save the Santa Monica Mountains from development, from encroachment. But she never said that. What she did instead is exactly the Jacques Cousteau quote. She took us hiking. She would have a hike once a week. We would all go hiking together. And of course, you would fall in love with these mountains. And then you realize, well, of course you want to save and protect this. But she wasn't preaching to us. She was just embracing us. And so anyway, I really identified with that quote.
Thank you. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, because you can sit there and preach to somebody all day long, and it's not until they experience it for themselves that they fall in love with it and want to protect it, like you said.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she could have launched some kind of political campaign to save the Santa Monica Mountains, but instead she just took people hiking in the mountains.
That's beautiful. And speaking of hiking, you've got a book called Keep Chasing Waterfalls, and it's a story of adventure, tragedy, and defying the odds, and it has everything. How did you come about this story? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, unfortunately, it came about because of and that's the tragedy part of a freak accident at home. On November 28th, 2018, a day that I will never forget, I was upstairs here on the second floor of the house in my office, and it was a rainy day in Southern California, which is really unusual in November. And a friend was ringing the doorbell downstairs, and I thought, oh, she's going to get wet. I've got to go down and get her. And so I ran down the steps really fast, missed the bottom two steps, went flying horizontally, and instantly knew that something major had happened. And what had happened is, it turns out, is that I had ruptured my left Achilles. And then I felt kind of like a smarty pants when my husband took me to urgent care. By this time, I'm already, using crutches immediately because I couldn't walk. And in urgent care here, I had the cell phone number of my orthopedic surgeon who had done a little work on my knee at one point. So I'm calling him from urgent care and I'm thinking, look at this. I have the cell phone number of my doctor. And but that turns out to be really a misplaced feeling. Because when the next morning, when my husband and I went in to see him, he said he had done an x-ray, urgent care had done an x-ray. It was very clear that my left Achilles was ruptured. And so this doctor, who shall remain unnamed because I don't want to file a lawsuit against him, although I could, he looked at my Achilles and said, I can do this. I can repair this. I used to do Achilles repair 20, 30 years ago. Well, if some you or your husband, anybody in your family goes in seeking medical care, and whatever it could be heart, it could be anything. In my case, it happened to be Achilles. And the doctor says, oh, I used to do this 20, 30 years ago. Well, that's right. You are shaking your head no. And my husband and I should have said, thank you very much. And we'll check back with you. And we should have found somebody in this country. Now, there are not that many doctors that really specialize in the Achilles only, but we should have found one. We eventually did find one in New York. But instead we were just, I'm not walking, I'm on crutches. I'm just relieved that there's some medical person in front of me who says, oh, I can fix this. But he botched the surgery. The whole area became necrotic. And I don't think at that point I even knew the word necrosis. I'm not even sure I'd even heard it, but that just means that something is dead and dying. And where my left ankle had been and where the Achilles was, that's all in past tense. It was just a big hole that was dead. And one of the doctors in my life said she had seen him on a platform. He was supposed to be making a speech somewhere. And she said that she felt like he was so out of it at that time that she would not have been surprised if he introduced that he wasn't in charge of his theater, his surgical theater, and that he introduced the infection during the surgery. Well, we don't know that, but we do know that I ended up with 8 surgeries and no left Achilles. And when you see these sports people, like football players or basketball players, and they are lamenting that they've had an Achilles injury, but the difference is they still have one. And it just needs to be repaired and, sewn back together or something like that. He botched my surgery so badly that the Achilles died. And I have photos of it, just the largest, strongest tendon in your body. And the surgeon, this was about the 3rd or 4th surgery, and the surgeon showed it to me. It was just a slimy little mass that had curled in on itself. So that was the tragedy of this story. And what compelled me to write about it was that I'm not really supposed to be walking today or hiking, but I was determined.
You are walking? Do you walk with the aid of a cane or anything?
No. I spent I ended up with 8 surgeries because of that. First to repair the Achilles, but then when that got botched, then a surgery to to deal with the necrotic wound because we didn't even know at that point what had happened to the Achilles. And so eventually I went to a physical therapy situation where there were only spinal cord injury patients there. These are patients, nobody's walking in there. They are coming in wheelchairs. They're coming in these devices where they're hooked into these things so they can stand up. And that was the population that I was a part of for 2.5 years, 3 days a week. And the physical therapist I worked with there, to his credit, said, I've never seen this situation. I've never dealt with this situation, but he found it challenging. And he's someone who is really one of these late night people. He's not an early morning person. But he was so challenged by my situation and my total dedication that he gave me an 8:30 slot in the morning, which was an hour earlier than he usually came in. But he knew that I was dedicated to not succumbing to this situation.
How do you stay strong when you receive a diagnosis like that and you faced 8 surgeries? How do you keep a positive outlook?
Well, that's a good question. Scientists have written about this, about how patients recover best. And some of it is pretty simple. At least it sounds simple, that if friends are like bringing you, it could be flowers, it could be a magazine. In my case, it was a neighbor who is Persian and would bring me pots of the most beautiful Persian food. And so you understand that your recovery matters to people who matter to you. And that is all helpful too. Although by that point I was using a knee scooter to get around, and people were so supportive and so helpful. It's awkward to visit patients in a hospital for anybody. You hear that a friend of yours is hospitalized. You want to be supportive, but you might think, well, what will I say to them when I get to the hospital? Maybe this will be awkward for me. And so people can tend to stay away. But there are some people who are bold enough themselves that they would come and visit me in the hospital. So a lot of it was in the beginning was the friends who really rallied around. My Persian friend once, most of the time I spent upstairs in bed with my leg elevated and ice around it, my ankle. And one friend, I'm not even sure she'd ever been upstairs in our house before, but she came upstairs and snuggled in bed with me.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference, so.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm always of the mind where I should just give them their privacy and let them, heal. But
no, don't do it.
Good.
Don't do it, because as a patient, you're so alone anyway.
Yeah.
And those two friends who came to visit, that was really memorable. So
Good.
other people came too. So
Good. From the time of the accident to when you were able to walk up and see a waterfall again, what was that experience like for you?
oh my goodness, that is the last chapter in my book. Prior to that last chapter, when my husband and I met 15 years ago, he had the place in Montana. I had the place here in Southern California. And my first job was, after I was able to get to Montana, was to walk down our driveway. And our driveway, it turns out, I didn't know this before, has 559 steps. And so I would use my hiking poles and my favorite oboes hiking boots. They happen to be red suede. Red is my favorite color. And to walk down that driveway was such an accomplishment. I mean, it was just like unbelievable. I did that. And so I thought, okay, if I can do that, maybe I can do one of my favorite hikes in Highlight in Bozeman, outside of Bozeman, to a waterfall, one of my favorite waterfalls. It's very horizontal. You know, some waterfalls are long and thin and narrow. This one is horizontal. And I thought, I'm ready to try it. And that was over 2.5 years after the accident. And I had been seeing all these professionals. I mean, not only physical therapists, but the acupuncture doctor, you name it. And if my physical therapist said, you need to add this, I mean, he said, think of yourself as the CEO of your recovery team. And so he would add all these modalities, and instead of my saying, I can't do it, I don't have the time, I did it all, and it ended up working. And so I get to that waterfall, and it was amazing. And I also, it was really interesting because it's not really a hike. It's more like a stroll. At a certain point, they actually had those blue, accessibility signs on the stroll. And I got there to the end, but on the way, this is my point, on the way, I didn't just walk straight through the way my husband and I ordinarily would be, just walk to the waterfall. You just love it so much. I kept stopping along the way. And I was thinking to myself, why am I stopping? Is my ankle hurting? I had never, after the surgeries, I had never walked this far before. Maybe this is too far. Maybe I can't do this. And I realized, no, that's not why I'm stopping. Why I'm stopping is I'm so thrilled and filled with gratitude that I can do this. And also it gave me the chance to really slow down. And one of the things I'm always encouraging people to do when they're out in the wild and out in nature is to pay attention to all of their senses. The sense of smell. What does it smell like? And when you're in the middle of a forest like that, the smell is fabulous. What is the touch like? There are bark on the trees that is it's just amazing to touch it. I had a friend who unfortunately is no longer with us, but she always said, trees are my relatives. And I love that because that's how I was feeling when I was back able to stroll in the wild with a waterfall destination.
It's beautiful that you were able to kind of slow down and take in and appreciate and be grateful for that walk.
Oh, absolutely. Every step of the way. And at first, my husband was circling back and he was saying, we don't have to go all the way this time, Jo. I go, oh, no. I am doing this. But, I had the proper hiking boots with a lot of traction. I had hiking poles. I don't understand why anybody hikes without hiking poles. It's good upper body exercise. So yeah, that remains a very big deal.
What is it about waterfalls for you that you love?
Well, that is a really good question. And it goes back to probably when I was 5 years old, growing up in Seattle. And my parents took me to see this beautiful waterfall, Snoqualmie Falls. It's just outside of Seattle. And it's a big, massive, powerful waterfall. And fortunately or unfortunately, however you feel about public amenities near waterfalls, it has all those public amenities. It's got a public bathroom. They sell postcards. It's a well-known destination, but it's just the forcefulness of the water. And then in the meantime, I've done some research, and I spoke to Dr. John Seifert. He's a professor of exercise physiology at Montana State University. And he says that waterfalls, plus the soothing rhythmic sound of waterfalls, it can lower one's heart rate and blood pressure and raise the oxycontin levels. And there's also the negative air ions about it. And I think this is so cool because ions are charged particles in the air, and they can be positively or negatively charged. And ironically, it's the negative ones that are the good ones. And they have an energizing and a refreshing effect. And they're particularly abundant in forests near waterfalls and rivers and streams. And this is so cool. The air near a waterfall can contain as much as 100,000 negative ions per cubic centimeter, while the air in your office there, where you are now and where I am, might only have as few as 100 per cubic centimeters.
Wow.
So it's no hyperbole why it feels so good to be near a waterfall. It's you're getting all those negative ions, and it's just refreshing. And I always think, have you ever seen when you're in the splashdown of a waterfall? I mean, if the splashdown is not a dangerous splashdown, I mean, there is a dangerous one near Big Sky where I have seen parents allow their children there, and they should not because the current is too steep. But have you ever seen families arguing near a waterfall? No, because they're so mesmerized and taken in by how refreshing it is and how good it feels and how good it makes them feel. They're not going to waste their time arguing or fighting with their parents. They're down there, waiting around in the splashdown, just having a great time.
Yeah, I took my son to Niagara Falls last summer,
Oh,
and we did the Maid of the Mist, where you go right up to the falls on the boat, and it's like being in another world. Have you done that
yes.
before?
Yes, but I did that. I'm so happy you brought that up. I did that, but in South America at Iguazu Falls. It's the maybe you're familiar with Iguazu. Iguazu is the longest falls across the top in the world. It's a mile and a half across the top.
Wow.
And yeah, and I thought, well, as someone who's a waterfall junkie, I have to experience this one. And uh, it was extraordinary. Of course, after it opened to the public, our grandson, who we took with us, said, "This is not Iguazu. It's a zoo," because they just let in too many people.
Man, that's a bummer.
Right.
Have you seen the Moonbow in Corbin, Kentucky?
No, no.
So there are two places in the world where it's called a moonbow. So when the moon is full and the mist coming off of the waterfall creates a rainbow, and it happens in Africa, and it also happens in Corbin, Kentucky. We've seen it a couple times. It's a very faint line, but you got to use your camera. I'll send you a picture of what it looks
Okay,
like.
good.
It's really beautiful, and people come over from all over to check it out.
Well, I am curious about that because my husband is from Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's
Right.
a little bit further south. It's right on the border, but it's
Okay.
definitely worth a drive.
Okay.
So I did see a picture where you were in a hyperbaric chamber, and I'm a scuba diver, and we fear those because that means that we have done something bad. We have the bends, and you need to go to the chamber. Why did you have to go there?
Well, because I had this necrotic wound, and it wasn't healing. And the medical thought about the hyperbaric chamber is it's particularly good for people with burns who need to heal the burn area. And so the thinking was that getting increased oxygen to the not the burn area, the wound area that had been my ankle might improve the healing, because there was no healing going on. It was all dead down there. And the problem, though, is I'm also claustrophobic. And the hyperbaric oxygen chamber I chose to go into was at UCLA, and it was big enough for 8 people. That to me seemed better than
yeah.
just one where, I was just going to die from claustrophobia. And but it was still very, very, very difficult for me. And when I was going in, there were 3 other people in the chamber with me. One woman who was very nice and held my hand most of the time. And in the beginning, the session was supposed to last 90 minutes. It actually lasted for 2 hours. And the 3 other people there had been going for multiple times, like 10 times, 20 times. And after 5 times, I said, this is too hard to do. I don't see any benefit. I don't see any improvement. Of course, you're not supposed to see any improvement after 5, but I said, I can't do it. How is this helping healing when my adrenaline is flowing so much because I'm so scared and nervous being in here, stuck in this? And I thought, what would happen if there's an earthquake in LA and I'm in that hyperbaric oxygen chamber? So after 5 times, I said, to hell with that.
Good for you. It sounds like you were really an advocate for your own health and really took an active part in your healing journey.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I had never met anybody, and I still haven't met anyone who does not have an Achilles. These athletes who are complaining about their Achilles injuries, they still have one. Yeah, I took a very active part.
That's good. We are almost out of time. Can you tell people where they can find you on your website, where they can buy your book?
Well, that is a good question. My website is my name, Jo, J-O, Giese, Giese.com. And what I'm looking for right now is a publisher who wants to publish this book. I have another book out there right now, Never Sit If You Can Dance, which came out for Mother's Day, which was a Amazon bestseller, has done really well. For some reason, we haven't, a publisher hasn't fallen in love with this one yet, but I'm hoping they will.
Oh my gosh. I think it was the first chapter that I saw come through my email, and I'm hooked and I need to read more. It's a great story, and I'm sure the right person's gonna catch it, and it's gonna.
I hope so. From your lips too.
Yes, exactly. And before we go, is there one tip that you have to share with people so that they can connect to nature more?
It's a piece of advice. Often you'll read tips on, even the New York Times will do this, how to safely hike alone. And as far as I'm concerned, and I've hiked all over the world, I've hiked in Africa, in New Zealand. I did the helicopter hiking in New Zealand. I've hiked in Iceland. I've hiked, and of course, all over the United States. And there is basically no way to safely hike alone. So the first thing I would say to somebody is ditch that idea, because even if you're still going to be in contact with somebody, you tell them I'm going on that trail and I'm gonna, you can turn your ankle, you can twist or like in Montana, I've been hiking where all of a sudden there are 3 bears on the trail. Now, I don't want to be hiking alone by myself when less than 30, wasn't, I was going to say 30 yards. It wasn't 30 yards. It was more like 40 feet away are three bears. It's not possible to safely hike alone. So that would be my advice for someone who wants to get into it, is find a pal and do it with someone else responsibly.
That's great advice. And thank you so much for sharing your story. And until next time, get outside and develop something wild.
Thanks for joining Wild Development Studio. We hope this exploration into the world of wildlife arts and adventure has sparked a desire to get outside and connect with something wild. If you have an adventure that's awe-inspiring, don't hesitate to share. Click the link in the description to submit your story to have it featured on our show or be a guest. Until next time, keep connecting to the wild and see what develops. The views, opinions, and statements expressed by individuals during Wild Development Studio productions do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Wild Development Studio or its affiliates. Participation in any activities, expeditions, or adventures discussed or promoted during our content may involve inherent risks. It is strongly advised that individuals conduct thorough research, seek professional guidance, and take all necessary precautions before engaging in any such activities. Wild Development Studio, its representatives, or employees shall not be held responsible for any injury, loss, damage, accident, or unforeseen incident that may occur as a result of participating in activities inspired by or discussed in our content. By choosing to engage with our content or act upon any information provided, individuals do so at their own risk and discretion.